Hej och välkomna till Udda Ting, en podcast om sällsamma historier, kreativitet och kreatörerna själva. Mitt namn är Henrik Möller, musiken är skapad av Testbild och den snygga loggan till podden är gjord av Malmökonstnären Nalle Chinsky. Det här avsnittet ska handla om den engelske författaren William Hope Hodgson, författare till böcker som House on the Borderland och Nightland. Idag skulle han antagligen ha varit mer eller mindre bortglömd om det inte vore för ett av hans största fans, H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft hyllade Hodgson i sin essä Supernatural Horror in Literature. Lovecraft skriver: Mr. Hodgson is perhaps second only to Algernon Blackwood in his serious treatment of unreality. Jag var liksom Lovecraft djupt imponerad av visionerna, i synnerhet i historien The Nightland, och kanske mest av att det kom från en, i alla fall så till synes oväntad person som Hodgson. Hodgson var en machofigur, en bodybuildare, en sjöman och senare soldat och antagligen hardcore patriot som stred och trots att han skadades flera gånger under kriget maniskt återvände och slutligen dog i första världskriget. Skrivarkarriären var en aktiv affärsidé för inkomst, vald när hans bodybuildingskola gick i konkurs, var i alla fall i min hjärna helt osannolikt och jag vill därför veta mer om Hodgson. Vem var han? Fast nu går jag händelserna i förväg. Eftersom jag också var en av dem som upptäckte Hodgson genom Lovecraft, men när jag försökte läsa Nightland så fick jag spel. Boken var skriven med en extremt uttröttande medeltida stil och omständig struktur. Och nu så måste jag bara säga att med all respekt till alla som är intervjuat som gillar boken som helhet, kärlekshistorien som är själva stommen i historien är under all kritik på alla tänkbara plan. Och jag tänker inte gå djupare in på det, men jag antar att man måste uthärda det för att komma fram till the good stuff i boken. Det vill säga alltså visionen om framtidsvärlden, The Nightland. Jag hade som sagt redan gett upp. Och det var först när jag 2001 fixade internet hemma som jag av en slump stötte på en sida skapad av en viss Andy Robertson. Han hade då påbörjat en fansida tillägnad Nightland och tack vare internet så skulle det visa sig att boken hade fans. Många fans. Och genom den hemsidan så fick jag inblick i vad jag tidigare missat på grund av bokens tråkiga första 2 kapitel. Nightland handlar om en gentleman, eller en riddare kanske man kan säga, som på 1600-talet förlorar sin stora kärlek. Och om jag inte minns det fel så blir hon ihjälbiten av vilda hundar. Vi hoppar nu långt in i framtiden där denna gentleman har reinkarnerats. Världen är nu sådan att solen har slocknat och de sista miljonerna människor har barrikaderat sig in i en enorm pyramid kallad The Last Readout. Utanför pyramiden lever dödliga, onämnbara existenser som endast hålls tillbaka från att storma pyramiden av ett kraftfält. Pyramiden och kraftfältet drivs av en underjordisk energi kallad Earth's Current, som nu sakta men säkert håller på att ta slut. Utanför pyramiden väntar då de här groteska, hotfulla varelserna som människorna kan se. Vissa av dem gigantiska som berg vandrades långt borta vid horisonten och andra mindre förvridna, groteska som kan ha varit människor en gång i tiden. I ständig väntan på att Earth's Current ska ta slut så de kan anfalla. Ibland så ger sig utforskningsexpeditioner ut för att hitta en lösning på energiproblemet och domedagen. Väldigt sällan återvänder någon igen. Hur som helst upptäcks plötsligt att det finns en annan fast mindre pyramid långt där ute. Vår hjälte får på märklig telepatisk väg reda på att hans älskade från 1600-talet, även hon reinkarnerad, lever i denna pyramid. En räddningsexpedition skickas ut men går under och slutligen så fattar vår hjälte beslutet att själv ge sig ut i mörkret. Lovecraft recenserar: Midway in the book, the central figure ventures outside the pyramid on a quest through death-haunted realms untrod by man for millions of years, and in his slow, minutely described day-by-day progress over unthinkable leagues of immemorial blackness, there is a sense of cosmic alienage, breathless mystery, and terrified expectancy, unrivaled in the whole range of literature. The last quarter of the book drags woefully, but fails to spoil the tremendous power of the whole. Allowing for all its faults, it's yet one of the most potent pieces of macabre imagination ever written, and it's said to have been the author's favorite among his works. The picture of a night black, dead planet with the remains of human race concentrated in a stupendously vast metal pyramid and besieged by monstrous, hybrid and altogether unknown forces of the darkness is something that no reader can ever forget. Shapes and entities of another non-human and inconceivable sort, the prowlers of the black, man-forsaken and unexplored world outside the pyramid, are suggested and partly described with ineffable potency, while the night-bound landscape with its chasms and slopes and the dying volcanism takes on an almost sentient terror beneath the author's touch. Nick Owen har Nightland som sin favoritbok och har därför startat en Facebookgrupp dedikerad till boken där Nightland-illustrationer från tidigt 1900-tal och fram till dagens datum plus information delas av fans världen över. Tell me about the first time you encountered Nightland.
So I'm guessing 1988 to 1989, and there was a bookstore in my main hometown. It's not where I lived, but it was the biggest town to us, called Newbury. And there's a second-hand bookshop there called the Invicta Bookshop. Have you read Terry Pratchett? So you may be familiar with his concept of bookshops, where they are magical places with corridors leading off into the nether regions of some magical. The Invicta Bookshop was that shop. If Terry Pratchett hadn't modelled his work on that bookshop, I would not be surprised. But it was a stunningly good second-hand bookshop, and you could get lost in it for hours. And I did. He used to have boxes, just cardboard boxes of books, completely. I mean, all the books were all on shelves, but the stuff that he hadn't got around to classifying was just in boxes. And this book was sat on the top, and I found it just as I was walking out. And it was 50 pence, which in those days would have bought you absolutely nothing at all, just like it buy you absolutely nothing at all today. The cover was the pterodactyls, which was not entirely relevant to the story, given that nothing flies, and the big white pyramid. So I just picked it up and read it, and I picked it up when I got home to start, and it was a real hard start. So I didn't bother for a couple of months, and then found the book again and thought, no, I need to persevere with this, because I was of that time where I would never not finish a book. I don't know if you go through that or if you're still like that, but when you start a book, got to finish it. I'm not like that now. I've got to the point now where I can't be bothered with this book, and I just put it down because life is too short. But in the olden days, I'd read a book, and I persevered, and suddenly I was halfway through it, and I just really, really was drawn into the story. I was drawn into the magnitude of the story. It was a work of imagination that completely took me by surprise. It's one of those books where I genuinely think it's difficult for us to fully grasp the concepts of the time scale involved. And he did it quite well, because, he's talking about a society, joining the two societies, our society, which got a sort of almost an honorary mention, or his society, I should say, because obviously it was written 100 years ago. Got an honorary mention, and then it sort of skipped to the millions and millions of years into the future. And then, of course, the mysteries that were never explained. I mean, nothing gets better. Hitchcock said, the best mysteries are the ones you hold in your head. So it's really what held me with the book. And when I'd finished reading it, obviously the first thing you do when you really, really enjoyed a book is you recommend it to your friends, your wife, and they started it, and they said, no, this is so strange, so badly written, that I think even today, I think I'm the only person that I know in real life that's read the book. I can't honestly say I've actually physically touched anybody who's read the book.
There's also a version written by James Stoddard called Nightland, A Story Retold, which is a rewritten version with a more accessible language. And I heard he changed a few things around, not just the language, but also some of the characters and the plot structure to make it easier to understand.
Yes, it was more accessible. The language was a little bit more palatable to, I guess, the modern flavour. But to be honest with you, I'm with a lot of other people who believed that the language he used was very appropriate for the story he was telling. Certainly a lot of people in the group that I run seem to believe that the language really helped, and it wasn't an accident that he chose to write it in such a stylized manner, because in some respect it did make it a little bit more alien. And we were talking about a world that might as well have been alien anyway. So, for me, absolutely worked.
How well known was Hodgson then and now?
And I have this fear that this feeling that if we didn't have the internet, a lot of people would never know of Hodgson at all, because I think he probably would have just faded and gone, except for a few people who took the trouble to read the books or find the books. I mean, even now, some of the books seem to be a bit hard to get. You have to order them. So I think, sadly, I'd probably say that, no, he wasn't that well known to the general population within England.
I found Andy's internet page about the Nightland sometime in 2001, and I was very impressed. I know that you've had some contact with Andy.
No, actually, I lent the book to a friend and never got it back. And then, having created the Facebook page group, I then realised I didn't actually have a physical copy of the book. So obviously I'd go online. This was before Amazon and before eBay, and it might have been around when eBay was in its early days. So I went online to see if I could find it, because if you type in the Nightland, there's not a lot that came up apart from Andy's site. And Andy's site was just a complete masterpiece of tribute to the work. So it was very easy to find in those days, because if that was your interest, that was the only thing there. And of course, it was very well written, and it was a fan. I thought, wow, I'm not the only one. Sent an email to Andy through his page saying, look, I've set up a Facebook group, realizing that he was actually probably committed more to the story than I was. Just basically, look, I've kind of set this up. If you want to join, if you want to sort of become, an admin for it, if you want to be the admin and sort of set it direction and whatever, you are more than welcome to. And I don't think I ever heard back from him, not formally. And I think the group had started up, maybe had about 15, 20 members. And then Andy just joined the group. Whether it's because of the email I'd sent him, or I never knew. He never explained it. So he may have just stumbled across it and said, oh, I'll join that. So it wasn't, unfortunately, he did sort of die a little while after that, maybe 2 or 3 years after that. So never really got to know the gentleman except through the passion of his work. Obviously, Andy had a lot of tribute stuff because he was encouraging people to write. And so there are a couple of books out where people have taken the universe that Hodgson has created, and they've developed their own stories. And those books are available for purchase.
What was it that fascinated you so much about Nightland?
To be honest, my interest evolves as I'm reading the book. I'll be quite frank with you. Hodgson describes it as a love story. And interestingly, I don't see it as a love story until the very end. Really something that was never explained. So it kept the mystery all the way throughout. And it just interjected the horrors of the Nightland. And there was no excuse, there was no explanation. It didn't try to explain itself. So it gave the reader all the tools, or I should say the barest tools needed to envisage themselves in that book, without actually trying hard at all. So if you're into that kind of horror genre, it was perfect because it let the mind do everything for you, and it just nudged the mind along. So if you've got an active imagination, you didn't need any of the, the descriptive prose that might go along with some of the other books. And I just found it very refreshing because it just let me enjoy the story as it was unfolding in my mind. And it was a book of parts as well because, we had the journey, we had the discovery, there's a lot of action in it, there's the fights, and at the end of the day, I'll tell you, when I finished reading the book, what I remember most of all is the love story, which is weird because when you're reading the book, it doesn't feel like a love story at all.
But in all honesty, the love story is terrible.
Terrible. It's not a word. No, but it's very old-fashioned. The people that have studied the book have concluded that he was quite immature. when he wrote the book. And there's a lot of stuff that he didn't understand. And in those days, probably perfectly reasonable. And the guy could have been in his early or middle 20s and still know absolutely nothing about romance and, marriage and relationships, as a way that we know them today.
Do you have a favorite scene in the story?
The bit that I literally have to finish, once it started, is the race home. Once Shani's actually been hit by the voices in the night, and she falls effectively dead in his arms. He had this distance to run from where she fell to the border of the pyramid. That bit, it's impossible to put it down. Even though I've read it 5 or 6 times, it's just impossible to put down because there's so much drama in it, and it's it's as good as any car chase in any film I've ever seen.
Genom Facebook-sidan kom jag i kontakt med tv-producenten, eller som hon vill kalla sig, Creative Originator, fransk-kanadensiska, Catherine Ouimet. Why did you choose Nightland as a potential TV series?
Cirque du Soleil Media, it was put together 4 years ago to look at television projects and game and virtual reality. The Nightland fit into all the categories we were looking at. If we wanted to be innovative and imaginative, and we thought if we looked at very unusual source material like the Nightland, which is very odd, that perhaps we'd have a chance to develop something very original and different. We felt it had all the elements to make it a successful young adult TV series because it had like a hero with the young man, it had a young woman, there was night hearing, kind of telepathy that was a bit different than what we see usually. It had huge mythology, a huge map of the world, monsters, creatures, and all this kind of felt marketing-wise, we could find something there. The one thing that kind of irked people a little bit was that it was too dark. But then we'd often point out that Game of Thrones is quite dark, except for the Mother of Dragon parts where it's really sunny and it's shot in Prague. So we felt that with Nightland, if we had kind of a cool parallel life with the Baroque 17th century period, then we'd have that light by going back and forth, not as time traveling like Outlander does, but more like a split screen cool kind of thing. So that the night hearing would also be across time as well, not just across the Nightland.
Are you trying to use the original story, or are you just using the Nightland world?
Well, that's a good question because when I came over to London and pitched a project to Left Bank Film, I asked this producer, and she was telling me that the best way to properly, successfully adapt a novel is sometimes to use the novel as a prequel, and then you launch off into what a sequel would be like, or vice versa. Use a novel as a sequel and start with a prequel, but maybe perhaps leave it all behind. Well, we didn't want to do that because Nightland has such super cool elements, and we've seen it. It spawned so many fan work and new books, and sometimes the books were almost better than his novel because, to be honest, it's kind of a bit stifled, the Old English, and there's not that much of a plot, and so we had to put flesh to it. But we loved all the fact that he wrote about technology that didn't even exist. There was no airplanes. Hardly. There were radio was just starting. So he's thinking of technology that's so timeless, like H.G. Wells. So that left us a lot of place to think about what we would do. And we kept the young man. We didn't want to call him the young man. We gave him a name, Andros, and we kept her, and we kept Mirdath. And we liked that the handmaid would have a life too in the future. And so we start in the Great Redoubt with the pyramid that takes 200 days to cross. And with Andros coming of age and being taught by the Monster-Wookens, and he's into the depository of knowledge, and he's finding out that, oh my God, it's not a legend. It was true that a core group of rebel left and started a lesser redoubt across the Nightland, until he hears Nanny calling out to him, and he immediately remembers her and decides to go into the Nightland, which is to suffer a fate worse than death. And so that was fun to us to imagine what would that be like in TV. And these awful creatures that everybody was like, they're too monstrous. We're like, no, we love the abhumans and the silent towers watching. all the place that he's leaving for sound, but slow sound and slow motion that is quite great for speculative sci-fi, and it's horrific in a different kind of way than what we're used to, with like super hard action and scary because you're just like, it's in your face. We were going to build on all the sound and silence and the night hearing. And so he does go and get her, and too late, she doesn't make the trip back because it's so harrowing, the Nightland traveling. She doesn't make it, as you know from reading the book. Whoever hasn't read the book, big spoiler alert, he brings her to the tree of life, fed by the earth current, and she revives. And of course, she's resurrected. And the book ends there, but we didn't want to end it there. We felt that if he's a hero, let's turn him into a kind of a Moses figure. And Andros, the young man, has been called to bring his people out of the Nightland into a lighter place. So he goes back to where the Silent Ones have made camp, because he has a feeling that they're hiding a rift in time, and he leads his people through the rift in time. And he goes back, maybe not 25 million years before, like in the 17th century, but maybe just 20 million years before humanity had to go and build a great redoubt to protect themselves. So it's kind of, so the next season would be brighter. It would be shot in South Africa because tax credits are good and it's cheaper and the light is amazing. We've seen a lot of films like District 9 and other sci-fi there. And this would be kind of cool because we would be looking at how to colonize a brand new planet, because Earth will survive better without us and will not die. The planet will not die until the sun is extinguished, which is so far away that Nightland still exists in our timeline. So the next season is kind of interesting because it will look at colonizing a new Earth 20 millions after, before we destroy it. And we then our writers and our showrunner can go anywhere they want with it. So that's what we're keeping from the novel and how we've expanded it.
Ja, det ska bli intressant att se om det blir någon film eller tv-serie av Nightland. Så vitt jag vet så den enda filmatiseringen av ett Hodgson-verk är Matango, en japansk film från 1963 som är baserad på A Voice in the Night, en kortnovell av Hodgson. Och jag förstår det, den har en väldigt tacksam handling. Den börjar ute på havet där ett skepp möter en mystisk liten roddbåt ute i dimman. I båten sitter en ensam gestalt. De kan inte riktigt se honom på grund av dimman och mörkret, och han vill inte komma för nära dem heller. Han säger att han bär på en väldigt farlig, smittsam sjukdom. Så de hjälper honom och skickar ut lite mat, lite proviant i en liten låda som han får med sig och tackar dem. Då börjar han berätta sin historia. Han har nämligen förlist tillsammans med sin fru, och de byggde en flotte och simmade i land på en öde ö. På ön hittar de ett övergivet skepp. Och på skeppet finns en väldigt mystisk svamp. Efter ett tag märker de att den här svampen har spridit sig från det här skeppet ut över hela ön. Slutligen tar deras proviant slut och deras enda val är att börja äta de här svamparna. Svamparna visar sig vara väldigt, väldigt goda. Efter ett tag förstår de att svamparna är gravt beroendeframkallande. Och om man äter den här svampen så förvandlas man sakta men säkert till en sorts svampvarelse. Så deras val nu är att äta svampen, överleva och förvandlas till en hjärndöd svampvarelse eller svälta till döds. Det lilla vi vet om Hodgson är att han föddes 1877, andra syskonet i ordningen av 12. Han hoppade av skolan som 13-åring och flydde till sjöss. Många säger att stämningen och realismen i Hodgsons historier som utspelar sig ute till sjöss är resultatet av denna tid. Som ganska liten, klen och fager blev han trakasserad av de andra sjömän, vilket ledde till att Hodgson började styrketräna. Flera år senare skulle han starta sitt eget gym. School of Physical Culture, som det då kallades. En av de mest kända händelserna i Hodgsons liv var den så kallade Houdini-kontroversen, eller Blackburn Challenge som den egentligen hette. Utbrytarkungen Houdini hade brutit sig ut ur Blackburns fängelse, och detta fick polisen att framstå i dålig dager, så de var alltså sura. Så när Houdini nu återvände till Blackburn för att köra sin nya föreställning som gick ut på att staden fick komma på sina egna handbojor och Houdini skulle sedan bryta sig ur dem, då utsåg polismyndigheten Hodgson som drev sin bodybuildingskola till att bli den personen som skulle hålla i eventet och därmed sätta Houdini på plats. Hodgson, som måste ha sett sin chans till att bli mannen som skulle knäcka Houdini och därmed göra reklam för sin skola. Så Hodgson, han tog med sig en av sina bodybuildervänner och tillsammans så pluggade de låsen och snörade ihop bojorna med ståltråd. Och inte nog med detta, utan de spände åt fängslet så hårt att blodcirkulationen ströps åt i Houdinis armar. Houdini protesterade, men det fanns ingenting han kunde göra. Det var trots allt det som han hade utlovat. Houdini kämpade i timmar och publiken blev rastlös och började bua. Till och med Hodgson tröttnade och gick hem. Sent på kvällen lyckades Houdini slutligen bryta sig loss med blodiga armar. Hela händelsen blev ett antiklimax och lämnade en bitter smak i munnen på samtliga. Publiken som hade förväntat sig en föreställning och fick tortyr istället buade ut Hodgson. Houdini slutade med sina vågade utmaningar i denna stil och återvände heller aldrig till Blackburn. Och Hodgsons bodybuildingskola gick i konkurs. Det var denna konkurs som fick Hodgson att ge sig in på skrivandet. Det intressanta här vore om Hodgson nu hade vunnit utmaningen och blivit känd som mannen som knäckte Houdini. Då kanske hans skola hade gått bra och kanske hade han då aldrig skrivit Nightland eller House on the Borderland.
John Linwood Grant driver sidan greydogtales.com om weird fiction och konst och han är specialiserad på Hodgson-karaktären Carnacki the Ghost Finder. En serie om en så kallad psychic detective. Carnacki är alltså ett medium som löser övernaturliga fall. Mycket riktigt, en desperat affärsidé av Hodgson. Ett försök till ett steg bort från de mer extrema historierna som till exempel Nightland för att skapa en återkommande hjältekaraktär i vårt universum. En sorts Sherlock Holmes-figur. Carnacki blev inte den hit som Hodgson hade tänkt sig. Och det var kanske det som fick honom att slutligen ge upp skrivandet. Och ironiskt, idag är Carnacki kanske Hodgsons mest kända kreation.
I don't know whether you saw what I wrote in Grey Dog Tales last week. We counted over 150 stories which have come out around Carnacki in particular, or dwelling on themes from Hodgson. The occult detective side is particularly popular. There are more Carnacki stories based on Carnacki than there are any other British Victorian or Edwardian detective except Sherlock Holmes, which is quite amazing. And there are more coming out. It's a sort of small renaissance, a small renewal. His wife had a lot of problems after his death in trying to raise any sort of money or sell a few of the last stories. And it was, I think, a very difficult time. I think part of the problem was his writing. He was experimenting with different styles. It was a mixed set of stories he put out. And, of course, unfortunately, he died at the end of the First World War. There was never any chance to revise or develop either his themes or his styles, as some authors have been able to do, move on year by year. So we only have really quite a brief period of his writing. It's very difficult. There are very few letters by Hodgson or about Hodgson, so there isn't a lot of material. Sam's done his best to dig out as much as possible, but he had this brief burst of activity with the Nightland books, the Glencarrig, the Ghost Pirates, House on the Borderland, the Carnacki stories, and then of course he went to war. And that was the end of it. So we don't know what he might have done later. I mean, it's clear from the Nightland and from Glencarrig that he was experimenting with styles. He was trying different ways of writing, some more successful than others.
Tell me about the first time you encountered Nightland. What did you think about it?
The immediate imagery of the enormous pyramid city. Just something you don't come across in most other books. So astonishing. And I think the second thing, I read it as a teenager, the second thing which never left me was what we were saying earlier, the appalling malevolence, the way in which you couldn't understand. The monsters bulked around the city. where you can barely see one ear or an eye. The watchers, you don't know what they're doing, you don't know why, but you're left with this feeling of some beast, some cosmic beast, crouching at the doorstep. I'd not come across anything quite that monstrously different before. They're not like aliens, like an alien race. They are something huge, which you will never know what they think, what they want, or anything, except that the feeling that the narrator gives you is that they are hostile towards the city, towards the last of humanity.
Do you have a favorite scene in the story?
The House of Silence. There's a house with lights in it, or a building with lights in it, and I know on the way back, he and the girl try to creep past it, and you have that terrible feeling that at any minute. Again, this is Hodgson at his best. Any minute something will happen, something terrible, something evil, that they're under terrible threat. But he doesn't define it. He doesn't go the cheap, easy way, as happens in some horror. He just leaves you with that feeling that the narrator says in peril of his soul. It's more than just something will come and attack him. It's like his very soul is at risk, which is, a big theme for Hodgson. The same crops up very much in one or two of the Karnaki stories. It's not his body that's in peril. It's his very essence, his very soul is in peril. In the Nightland, from the House of Silence and the monstrosities. In Karnaki, from forces from the outer circles. Again, something which we can't comprehend. And that is one of his great themes, one of Hodgson's great themes.
What has always fascinated me, he was such an unlikely person to write these kinds of stories of supernatural horror and very imaginative horror of fantasy. Do you have any idea what made him tick?
I think horrified by his experience at sea. I suspect that informed some of his feeling in the writing and in the poetry. He often portrays the sea as a monstrous thing we can't understand, which basically is out to kill us. He's out to get us. And I wonder whether that was part of the inspiration of this idea that there's something huge which is not our friend. He said his treatment at sea in the end was horrifying, and he wouldn't wish it for anyone. Other than that, I'm not entirely sure. It's quite interesting that he doesn't use Christian religious ideas very much. Very, very rarely. I believe his father was a vicar, or minor Church of England, an Anglican, I think. With Lovecraft, with Robert E. Howard, with Clark Ashton Smith, you had so many letters, so many exchanges, that you could form a picture. You could even see how some of their writing developed and changed, and they criticised each other. But for Hodgson, we don't know the process. We don't know whether he spoke to other writers, and people said, "Oh, I don't like this," or "I think you should do that." I suspect with Karnaki, if you're talking about making money for the family. With Karnaki, that there must have been a thought. He had Blackwood's John Silence. He had Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. He had some examples of turn-of-the-century detectives. And, if I were Hodgson, I imagine he tried to create something which had his own, this philosophy of the outside monstrous strange, and yet might have a commercial value in the same way that Arthur Conan Doyle did. And to try and I think you said earlier, they were more commercially successful. And I've no doubt that he thought, well, maybe, if I can create a second Sherlock Holmes. And the funny thing is, as far as the occult and the psychic side goes, he did. But he didn't live to know that. The fact that we talk about this now in 2016, when you think of how many late Victorian Edwardian authors are almost forgotten, that's quite impressive in itself. And we still come back to the fact that if you removed everything else, the Nightland as a core has not been bettered. No one has yet written anything quite like it.
Being a scholar of the Carnacki stories, do you have a favorite Carnacki story?
Thinking back to when I was a teenager, the one which scared me the most was the Carnacki tale, The Whistling Room. It has a horrible image within it, the Whistling Room, of the room itself is possessed, and you see the blackened, burnt lips forming in the floor of the room. It was one of those pictures. The whistling was coming from a monstrous mouth, which had formed itself out of the structure of the room itself. And again, if you think about that, you're young, you're reading this in bed or whatever, and I was, wow, that is so different. That is so interesting.
En person som jag kände var ett måste av mig i den här podcasten om Hodgson är världens kanske främste Hodgson-expert, Sam Gafford. Och det mesta av informationen jag använder i den här podcasten kommer från Sam Gaffords bok Hodgson, A Collection of Essays. Efter mycket om och men fick jag slutligen tag på Sam som ställde upp en intervju. Men oturligt nog har intervjun så otroligt dålig kvalitet att jag blev tvungen att hålla den till ett minimum. When did you start doing scholarly work on Hodgson? I heard that you worked closely with Lovecraft biographer S.T. Joshi.
And this would probably be like the late 80s, and that's when S.T. Joshi and I started talking back and forth, and we were like, gee, I wonder if there's stuff out there that nobody knows about. So we started putting together the bibliography that we would work on for like about 15 years, and found that there was a great deal of material that was out there that people weren't really familiar with, either because it hadn't been reprinted in a long time, or it only appeared once in the case of some of the articles and things. So with SD encouraging me, I started to work more on finding more of these lost Hodgson things, and I started publishing them in my own little small press in the late 80s. And everything kind of like grew from there, and I'm happy to say that at this point in time, if somebody is curious about Hodgson, they're going to have a much easier time to find his work than I did back in the 80s, because all of the novels and the Carnacki stories, they're available online free because they're out of public domain, and you can find some inexpensive reprints of some of the lesser stories that are done like print on demand. So it's really amazing to look at the situation now, back to when I remember back in 1980 when I was going crazy because I couldn't find any of these things.
You've done all this scholarly work and you've read through the few letters available by Hodgson. But yet, there's still nothing known about him. Why is that?
Lovecraft wrote so many letters that on any given day you could tell what he had for breakfast. But Hodgson is this huge mystery. The letters were very superficial. They don't really say very much. They don't say like, well, when I wrote the Nightland, I was thinking of this and this. All he really says in it is, you won't believe how many times all my stories have been rejected.
Så mitt samtal med Sam blev kanske inte riktigt så bra som jag hade hoppats på. En annan grej jag upptäckte när jag kollade in Nightland-sidan var en kille som heter Kolja från Belgien som hade skapat ett brädspel baserat på Nightland, så jag var tvungen att fråga honom om det. How did you decide to make a board game out of Nightland?
Well, like most people, I discovered the Nightland by reading Lovecraft, and I was sort of working my way through all Lovecraft's recommendations in weird fiction. So I found the Nightland second-hand bookshop. I read it in 2 days, and I was really amazed by that book. It's the only thing that I ever encountered that can sort of stand the comparison to Tolkien, and especially the Silmarillion. And yeah, it became my favorite book, and I've read it a few times since. And if I find it in a second-hand bookshop or something, I buy it and I give it to my friends to read. And then I got this idea into my head that I was going to adapt the Nightland into a board game. So I started doing that and couldn't stop doing it. And I really enjoyed like the way you could tell a story via a game or a board game. And the idea was to basically follow the plot of the book, which is a very simple plot. Going on a journey one way, save the princess and come back. But then the rules had to sort of reflect the book as well, and the structure of the game had to reflect the structure of the Nightland. So I made these several modules basically, which are A4 size, so people can print them out. Each one is a chapter of the Nightland. Put them together and then you have like a very long board, and you start at the bottom in the Great Pyramid, and you need to end up at the top, which is the smaller pyramid, and then you have to go all the way back. But I shortened the way back. It's not like in the book that you have to make the entire journey back. The way back is basically reflects the dash back to the Great Pyramid that the protagonist makes at the end, which I already explained is actually my favorite scene. And it's also a gameplay element because you start out as two players, two guys who both think they're entitled to the princess. Two of you set out on journey. You're sort of rivals, and the board plays against you both, and you also play against each other. You can hinder each other, you can block paths, you can place enemies on the board, and everything is based on what happens in the chapters in the Nightland as well, because every chapter on the board also has events that can happen which reflect events that happen in the book, and these events are initiated by the players against the other player or against themselves if they roll badly. So there's a strategic element to it, in a sense that you have to keep ahead of the other guy, but also not kill him, because then you both lose, because you can't make it back without the assets of the other guy, who dies when you get to the other pyramid first. So it's a long-term strategy and short-term strategy. Basically, short-term strategy to be the first one to get to the next chapter, and long-term strategy to try to keep the other guy alive, but to hinder him as well. And it's actually quite simple once you got the rules. I try to make it as simple as possible.
So, if anybody would like to contact Kolja about this board game, you can reach him on his email, kolja93, that is KOLJA93 @hotmail.com. I will also include this email in the description of this episode. Hodgson-forskaren Sam Gafford har ganska starka bevis som talar för att romanerna som nu är utgivna i den här ordningen, The Boats of Glencarrig, House on the Borderland, The Ghost Pirates och Nightland, faktiskt var skrivna i omvänd ordning, vilket då skulle innebära att Nightland var den första boken han skrev. Detta känns väldigt roligt. Det är en kompromisslös, extremt fantasifull historia, fast med haltande logik, språk och struktur. Ett inte helt ovanligt första verk hos en stor talang. Och det är ju också logiskt, eftersom efter Nightland så blir hans historier då bitvis mer tillgängliga både i språk och, om än inte helt, även så i plotten. Men bortsett från Carnacki-kortnovellerna är Hodgson idag mer ihågkommen för sina mer originella verk som House on the Borderland och Nightland. Inte Glencarrig och Ghost Pirates. Min teori bakom varför Hodgsons historia är så originella idag och att ingen gjort något liknande är att på den tiden så fanns det ingen utarbetad mall för en historia skulle se ut, och redaktörens arbete så även annorlunda ut. Utan målgruppsanalyser och dramaturgi. Hodgson var liksom Clark Ashton Smith när han skrev en enstöring i sitt rum, och ingen blandade sig i nämnvärt vad han skrev när han väl hade bestämt sig för att låsa in sig i sitt rum och sätta igång. Den mest intressanta frågan är kanske var dessa storslagna visioner kom ifrån. Och 1904 när han satte sig ner för att skriva detta, långt innan science fiction-boomen. Vissa har dragit paralleller till H.G. Wells, men jag har svårt att se likheter mellan de storslagna visionerna i Nightland och Wells' The Time Machine. Som sagt, det finns inte mycket känt om Hodgson, så att här blir vi tvungna att spekulera. Och enligt Sam Gafford
kommer antagligen de spekulationerna fortsätta ett bra tag till. Såvida inte någon hittar ett gäng glömda brev som är väldigt, väldigt personliga. Men som sagt, det har han väntat på 25 år nu, utan framgång. Ja, det var allt för den här gången. Jag heter Henrik Möller, musiken är skriven av Testbild. Hej då.